start with the ladies, but I will oblige you this evening. Thank you. I'm Steve Nabor. I came to the University of Houston in 1970, actually, to work on my PhD in biology and biochemistry. And after finishing there at U of H, I went on to a couple of postdoctoral fellowships. And one of those was in the arena of experimental pathology. So it was dealing with hormone secretory mechanisms, and this all predated the age of molecular biology, you have to understand. So it was very much disease focused, looking towards diabetes and mechanisms of insulin secretion and how that could be adapted or improved in order to ameliorate diabetes. Long story short, I began to see the very definitive medical applications of the research that I was doing. And after some time as a postdoctoral research fellow in a couple of different institutions, I decided at the ripe old age of 35 to go to medical school. And I did that with the intention of becoming a pathologist. And I then have been in Boston ever since, here at Tufts Medical Center as a surgical pathologist. And my focus has been primarily through the years on breast cancer and head and neck cancer. So a lot of what I do on a day-to-day basis is the diagnosis of cancer. And it doesn't involve really very much in the way of patient contact, because you're dealing primarily with biopsies and specimens and tissues from various patients. So whenever I do get to interact with the patient, I always tell them that the pathologist is the most important physician that you will never meet. And because what I do, using this microscope behind me and other tools today of protein and molecular biology, we're able to make much more definitive diagnoses around cancer in particular, and help to tailor the treatment that a patient is going to receive. So it has been a very rewarding career. And I would say that I would not be sitting here today talking to you about this if it had not been for the education and the opportunity that I have received at the University of Houston. So I've been eternally grateful to the university through all the years, and very happy to give back in any way that I can. And hopefully speaking to students whenever possible will in some way contribute to the development and success of other people who are at the university. So I'll leave it at that, Tiffany.
Thank you so much. Liz, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you. So I'm Liz Schwartz. I'm the Vice President of Exploration at Chevron. And from a degree perspective, I have an undergraduate degree in geology and a master's degree in geology. And then I went back to school when I first started working and got an MBA. My undergraduate's from Duke, and I majored in geology just because I loved all the sciences, and I made some friends who convinced me to take a geology class. And geology is all of the sciences wrapped up in one, and you get to go spend a bunch of time outside looking at rocks on field trips. And so I was hooked. That was the major for me. And I didn't really think about what I was going to do with a career with that, and it was the 1980s. But I applied to graduate school and went to the University of Texas at Austin, which turned out to be a very fortuitous choice because of the link between particularly the Texas schools and the oil and gas industry. And so I landed in a career with Chevron in 1990, really because of my degree and because I was at a school that was heavily recruited by the oil and gas companies. I've been with Chevron my whole career. 30 years. I've been really lucky to live around the world, work on projects all over the world, and I've been able to travel for work to 6 continents. So just a ton of fun working really interesting problems and meeting a lot of people. In terms of what I do, I'd say that I spent the first 10 years or so of my career in production, and that's really the teams of people between geoscience and engineering that are developing oil and gas fields and getting it out of the ground and delivering it to market. And so I did that for about 10 years, more or less. And then I broadened my career. So I've always been a continuous learner and did some things with the technology company. I worked in human resources with a bit, with an eye toward developing the earlier career geoscientists at Chevron, and some strategy roles. And then the last 10 years has really been in management. I didn't, again, start out really with an eye to being a vice president. I really liked making maps, but it turns out that I discovered about myself that I'm really pretty good at aligning people toward a common purpose. And I get a lot of satisfaction from a team working together toward a common goal. So that's my career. I did not go to the University of Houston, but as part of Chevron's connection with the university, Dean Wells was kind enough to invite me to join the advisory board, which I jumped at with a yes. I'm looking forward to being an adopted University of Houston person or cougar. Thank you.
Thanks, Liz. Nancy will go ahead and wrap up the introductions with you.
Okay, thanks, Tiffany. I'm Nancy Kralik, and I'm a U of H grad, but not in biology. My biology degree I actually got from Indiana University of Pennsylvania, which is a state university in Pennsylvania. And then I went to Humboldt State College in Arcata, California, and got my master's in fisheries biology. Then I came to Houston, moved to Houston, and I went to school. Interesting thing about U of H, it was very unusual in that it had not only a night school that a lot of us attended in engineering, but it also gave us the possibility of getting our undergraduate engineering degree as well as our master's. That is very unusual. So a number of us, we had to make up all the undergraduate courses, and we didn't have any space for fluff, any humanities in there. We just took statics, dynamics, thermo, fluids, and then all of our core master's engineering. So my master's is in civil and environmental engineering. And the biology side and the fishery side really fit well into the environmental engineering. It was interesting, folks who had come from the civil engineering side as a bachelor's and then wanted to get their master's, they were at a disadvantage because they hadn't had microbiology and a lot of the biology that helps you when designing wastewater treatment plants and water plants and so forth. So it actually was easier for those of us who came from the biology background. I work for Fluor Corporation, have been there 17 years here in Houston, and I lead the sustainability program for Fluor. For those people who don't know, Fluor is an engineering procurement construction company, global around the world. We have about 50,000 employees. And the sustainability job goes out through the organization. Everybody's a part of it. And we do things like capture our activities in our sustainability report. We just announced, our CEO just announced a new commitment. It's the Net Zero 2023, which means by the end of 2023, we will commit to going net zero, having no greenhouse gas emissions in our offices. So that's taking a good bit of my time to get everybody on board, and we're all pitching in there. Let's see. I do a lot of volunteer work with American Society of Civil Engineers, and I've been with a couple of different nonprofits. I just started with a new nonprofit that's dedicated to teaching children K through 12 environmental activities. So we teach the teachers who then teaches the students. And let's see, did I miss anything here? I am a licensed PE, and I'm a fellow with ASCE. I actually worked in the oil industry for about half my career with Marathon Oil, Shell, and Exxon, and traveled overseas, lived overseas. And then I came to Fluor's, very different. So those oil companies are now my customers in Fluor. Thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you all for sharing, and students, I hope you got a feel of all of their backgrounds and how diverse they all are and how they kind of got to where they are today. Panelists on the session today, we have a mix of majors. So we have some undergrad and graduate students within computer science, math, and biology, just to give you a feel of who's in the room, the virtual room today. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Caitlin, and she'll lead the rest of our panel discussion.
Thanks, Tiffany. And thank you so much to our panelists for being here. We have some great questions for you. I do want to let our students know that if you feel any questions that come on as you're hearing these panelists kind of talk about their stories and answering these questions, please add those into the chat. Tiffany will be answering those, or pausing us to say, hey, we have a great question in the chat. So we'd love to hear from you to make this engaging. But we're going to transition into some of our questions. I wanted to ask our panelists really quickly, would it be best for me to have the questions up for you to be able to see, or would you prefer us to stop sharing so that you can kind of see? Do you have a preference at all? No preference? Okay, we'll keep the
No
questions
preference.
on. Okay, I'll keep the questions up here then. We do have 6 questions. We may get through all of them, we may not. We'll just kind of see how we're feeling with these questions here. But the first one is, what role has education played in your career? So I think all of you spoke about your different educational journeys. So maybe speaking to that a little bit, or maybe to the question that sometimes we get from students is about changing your major and pivoting. So I don't know if you want to speak about how you pivoted your career. I think you all spoke about that, but if you want to dig a little deeper into that. Oh, I should probably say who would like to go first? This is always the awkward part, is like, who talks? Let's start with Nancy, since you ended, okay. And then we'll go back the other way.
My education has been vital. I don't know that my middle degree, my master's in fisheries biology, I don't know that that was critical, but at the time I thought it was. And probably our students can appreciate, you don't always know when you go in 3 years or 4 years ahead, you don't know what the market's going to be. So when I got out with my master's, and when I got my bachelor's in biology, I wanted to go on to school to get my master's. When I got out from the master's, you work for federal, state, or local governments. And I really saw myself out in the field, sampling, analyzing, and so forth. And at the time I came out, that was not going to happen, which is why I decided to then go into engineering. And I don't mean to put a damper on the students who are in NSM, but the engineering degree was the best thing that happened to me, because it gave me more credibility than a bachelor's in biology. And that's just what I've found. So I pivoted, but I was able to use what I had in the biology side very easily. And actually, as I mentioned before, better than some of the folks who came up with their bachelor's in engineering and then had to learn all the biology in order to be effective. So I think education, a master's is good. I don't know that sorry, Steve, but I don't know that I'd go for a PhD. But that's my opinion.
Thank you, Nancy. Liz, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, many of the same comments. I have this job because I decided to major in geoscience, and I started out as a chemistry major because I really liked chemistry in high school. and like I said, fell into geology, and it, you know, gave me this just amazing life over the past several decades. Once you start working though, I guess what I'll say to this question is you never stop learning. So your education goes on and on and on and on, and you don't necessarily get another suite of letters to put after your name. But I think, you know, part of a successful and long career is just to be constantly inquisitive and constantly interested in learning and augmenting education, either through formal night school like I did. I went to business school at night, or through taking a break and going back for a master's degree or a second master's degree or a PhD, or you know, even classes along the way at community college. Particularly right now, I know a lot of people who are enrolling in whatever they can to learn some of the math and computer science skills that you guys are learning as undergraduates, because it's so critical to at the workplace today, and in many of the fields, is being able to be what we call citizen developer, right? Write code on top of databases. So always learn. You know, at work, I get a question of why did I go get an MBA? And I did that for two reasons. One, because as a science major, as an undergraduate, there really was no time to take accounting or finance classes or business classes. I'd never read an annual report or anything like that. And once I got to the workplace, you know, in essence, every day is about, you know, applying your trade in order for the company to make money in some form or fashion, whatever that business is. And so the business classes were really handy. And so I wanted to get those. And then the other is I just wanted to be more versatile, because the late 80s were times, you know, a lot like today, where there were a lot of people majoring in geoscience. There were fewer and fewer jobs. And I didn't really know going in that it was going to be this, you know, 30-year career. And so I wanted to get some additional knowledge early that, you know, might make me more versatile. I think today's world, we were talking about this before you guys all got on, you know, so much has happened in the last year to open up, I think, more and more science careers for geoscience, biology, math, computer science, engineering, in terms of how are we going to address climate and some of the new technologies there. And I'll let Dr. Nabor talk about the medical profession, but I think it's a pretty exciting time actually to come out of college.
Thanks, Liz.
You know, I think both of you really encapsulated what education is all about. For me, I would have to say the education has given you the tools you need. I was a biology major. That gave you certain tools. And when I went on for a PhD, I learned tools of how to investigate scientific method. But in the end, what you realize is the role education has in your career. It's the tools. Where you really educate yourself and learn is in your career as you move along. And I think you've seen with both, you know, Liz and Nancy have said how you saw an evolution of interest and of skills, which, you know, has led you from being, in one case, here you were studying biology or studying geology and moving into managerial positions. And that really comes about from an acquisition of knowledge as you go along. And being able to change in a career. I guess my change would have been more from being purely a research scientist into combining my knowledge of research into clinical applications and providing clinical service to patients through diagnostic pathology. One thing I did miss, I guess, when I listened to both Nancy and Liz is I haven't lived all over the world. Basically, you know, been in Houston and Boston, so for all these years. So, you know, it all kind of depends upon the paths you follow. You don't know what's coming down the road. and what you may be able to take advantage of if you have the right skills and then can move into something else.
I think that that's a great way to kind of wrap up this segment, because what you all talked about was how you were started down one path and then you found a new approach, and you got another degree, and your career evolved. And so that's one thing in career services, we're always talking to students about being open to those new opportunities, excuse me, that show up that you didn't expect. So thank you all for speaking to that. Next question, what is one thing students would be surprised to learn about your career path? Steve, do you want to start first? Yeah, go ahead.
I was 35 when I started medical school. I was the oldest person in class, let's put it that way, by a good stretch. But it was fun. It kept me very young, and I had a lot of fun and learned a lot.
Liz or Nancy, anything to add?
Yeah, kind of a two-parter. One thing that surprised me when I think back is as a student, I never would have figured I'd be where I am today. It just never crossed my mind that, oh, I want to go here, I want to go there, and this is the end point. It evolves. You're open, as Steve said, to opportunities, as Liz said. But one thing I found that it's kind of surprising as you increase as you gain experience and so forth, you kind of have to be prepared to be viewed as that person kind of sometimes up on a shelf, that you aren't approachable. And so you have to make an effort to be approachable. So it can be surprising in the career that a person thinks, that person isn't going to want to mentor me, or that person, I can't talk to that person. And really, that's probably not the case.
That's well said, Nancy. I think I look back too, and I was always so in awe and nervous about people who are, in the job I have today. And, now in hindsight, of course, they're just people, just like everybody else. And, we're all vested in the next generation of students and employees coming in. I think people are surprised to know I grew up horrifically shy. And so doing something like this where I would have to speak in public, there's no way that I could have done this at all. Really the first few years, even including the first few years of my career. And it's kind of one of the fun things about working in an office. And I have a daughter who's an undergraduate in college and has now gotten a part-time job, is, when you go to work, all of a sudden everybody around you is kind of invested in your success too, because you're working on a team. And it just gave me more confidence than I ever thought I would ever have when I was coming out of school.
Great. Thank you all for sharing. I definitely picked up on that mentoring piece that Nancy talked about as well too. So to kind of go off script a little bit, would any of you be willing to just share a little bit about maybe any mentors that you've had in your career thus far? I always just love to hear about these different stories, and I think it really kind of speaks to the fact that our students need to know about this concept and maybe how you found your mentor, or what that relationship looked like. So open to anyone.
Well, I can start out again. I think I did have an undergraduate mentor years ago when I was growing up in South Dakota. I would say at the University of Houston, the person I did my PhD, as he was my advisor and major investigator, very, very crucial. And as I moved on to a postdoctoral fellowship, it was the now deceased, he was chair of pathology at Washington University in St. Louis. And I can still remember the day I came to him. We were at a meeting, actually. I did travel. The meeting was in Vienna, Austria. And it was a very large diabetes congress. And I told him, I said, I've been thinking about potentially going to medical school. And I remember him and he always smoked a pipe. and kind of chewing on that pipe a bit. And he said, "Can we have lunch tomorrow?" And I thought, oh God, where's this going to lead? And what it was turned out to be a very positive experience. And he was very supportive of the decision that I was about to make. And it's those kind of people that you meet periodically along your path that can have profound influence in shaping the way you think and perhaps even opening doors for you. And I think as students, as you move through your career, never forget that. Always be willing to give back and
Pay it back,
and
yeah.
pay it forward to the next generation. If somebody did it for you, you should be able to do that for somebody coming up.
Great advice. Any other mentor stories?
Nancy?
Mine is kind of it's not exactly a classic mentor, but it was my father. Once I graduated from Humboldt State, had my master's in fisheries biology, and I thought, what am I going to do? Market's not really good. He was a civil engineer, PhD structures, and he convinced me that I should go into engineering. And he was very supportive. Other folks, some folks were saying, oh, why are you going to spend so much more time in college? Is it going to be worth it? And is engineering and so forth? You wanted biology before. And he helped me to stay focused and was very supportive and very proud of me when I got my engineering degree.
That's great.
Yeah, maybe I'll just tell the story of my very first mentor. When I got to work, we had an assigned kind of mentorship, and that didn't work out very well. I just, that person was super busy and didn't have a lot of time for me. So I found my own mentor, and we actually had a two-way mentoring arrangement because it was 1990. So I taught him how to use email, and he taught me how to do geology in the petroleum industry. And it was perfect, right? Because we he needed me as much as I needed him.
Oh,
So you bring something, when you first get into the office, you're bringing something new, and feel free to make an arrangement where not only are you learning, but you're also teaching.
yes, that's so true. That is so true. I'm going to pause really quick here just to see if any of our students want to come off mute and ask any questions of our panelists. I'll give a few seconds here. I think they'd love to hear from you, a little bit about their backgrounds and their stories. So we'd love if one person would feel comfortable to come off mute and ask a really great question. We'd love that. You put folks on the spot, and sometimes this happens, but.
Can I jump to question 4?
Please, Nancy.
It's something that Dr. Nabor said about paying it forward. And I got thinking, I saw that question, I thought, what is success for me? And when I first started out, it was basically how much you're going to pay me, and what's my job, basically, what role. And as you continue in your career, now starting not right now, it's more legacy and paying it forward, and how are you going to help the people coming behind you. So it's why Liz and Steve and I are here tonight to answer your questions, and you no longer, at least I don't think of how much am I getting paid, what's my title. It's more, is it an interesting job, and can I pay it forward, and will it leave my legacy for folks?
I hope one day to be there, Nancy. I definitely see that coming, but I think you bring up a really great point, though. I think that piece about how your definition of success does change over time. And so, yeah, I definitely understand that. I think, you know, I'm starting out my career, well, maybe mid-year.
Yeah.
I don't know, Tiffany, how you would identify me, but I think definitely kind of understanding, you know, how your career is going to change and evolve over time and being okay with that. And how it may change, you know, if you have a family or if you have other commitments as well too, and working to navigate through that. So that's really great advice. All right, students, I think we'll move on. But since Nancy, oh, Harsha?
Yeah, I do
Questions?
have one question
Please,
to Nancy and everyone.
please go ahead.
So when after you completing your education, when you find that the marketplace for what you have studied is very low, so how would you deal that situation? So what are your confidence levels to move on to further, and any idea of next step you have taken? So I just wanted to know how you deal with that kind of a situation.
Great
Yeah,
question.
thanks, Harsha. I had just decided it was that I needed to get the engineering degree. And I was just very fortunate that I was in Houston and that University of Houston had this great program to allow me to do it and to continue to work. I was working temporary work and so forth. It allowed me, and then I finally got into the offshore oil business, but it allowed me to continue to make some money to pay the tuition, and at the end of it, achieve my goal, which was my degree. And I can't say enough about how good University of Houston was to me to have that program. But I had to decide that I was going to go into that program. I talked to a lot of people, and U of H did a great job of making it easy.
So Nancy, just to kind of summarize that. So to Harsha's questions, it was about you know, not having those opportunities available in your industry. So you chose to go back to school or to get more education. Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Any
and
others?
I would caution that I have two boys, and one of them was a little annoyed over the job market and so forth. This was about 6 years ago. And he said, maybe I'll just go back to school in computer science. And I said, don't go back as a bachelor's and spend 4 years. Try and find a program like University of Houston where you can go to night school, fill in those courses, go for a master's, fill in those courses. And he ended up not pursuing that. But yeah, look at various options to, you don't have to go back just for a 4-year program and then hope everything's going to come out okay at the end of that 4 years. There are lots of opportunities, and U of H gives some. I know you're already here, so I'm not trying to sell you on it, but sometimes you just got to analyze and just pivot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it's tough to come out into the job market because it does kind of have its ups and downs. So you had a really hot job market through 2019, a cooler job market at the moment, and I think indications that we'll probably get back to a hotter job market, sometime in the next little bit, and that doesn't necessarily help somebody who's graduating today and looking at how do I come out into the job market. And so I think you have to be kind of strategic about how you're going to spend your time, whether that's, I'm seeing folks sort of add on a 5th or a 6th year to get a master's at the same time as an undergraduate degree and just stay in school a little bit longer. Find a research project with a professor who might be tied into an industry as well. So you're doing, something that's applied from a research perspective while continuing in education. So kind of broadening, well, what does that first job look like that might, take your skills? And, you look at particularly math and computer science just seems to be something that everybody is hiring in some form or fashion. And if they're not today, they're thinking about, well, how do I bring people into my company that are coming with the new skills versus kind of the historical computer science IT skills. So it's a little bit of a waiting game but you have to think about how you're going to spend your time in this interim until things take off again.
That's great. Dr. Nabor, anything to add? Oh, I'm sorry, I think you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, you
Yes.
can. Yes.
Good, sorry.
That's okay.
No, I think that is good advice. You have to be able to make adjustments. And a young lady who was working here in the department as a technologist wanted to move along. She went over to a large biotechnology firm across the way here in Cambridge, and became very interested in data science. And she is now doing a master's in data science at Syracuse University. So again, this is someone who kind of found their stride in what they were interested in. And hopefully this will work out very well for her. And I think it was an opportunity. She consulted me about it. And I said, absolutely, because data science in today's world, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in the, whether it's in the oil industry, you name it, data science is very important. So again, it's looking for those opportunities that fit your own interests and skills. And I think the advice you've been given here with Nancy and Liz is very important for seeing that.
I agree. In a career services space, we call it sometimes retooling. And so how, potentially you go back to school or you get some certifications or different things like that. And so that's definitely something we speak about to our students that maybe want to make some of those shifts. So you all spoke to that completely. So thank you. Dr. Bidding, if it's okay, I'm going to go to our last question. And I would just love to hear from each of you. You've offered some really great nuggets, but this last one is usually my favorite question. So one, key takeaway that you want to provide our students, something that maybe you wish you would have known. Again, we have freshman to graduate student on the call right now. So that's kind of a wide range, but one, key piece of advice that you'd like to provide a student. Dr. Nabor, why don't we start with you, and then we'll do Liz, and we'll end with Nancy.
Yeah. Well, I think I may have already said it. I mean, I think it's to follow your instincts and follow your heart and what you're really interested in and what you enjoy. You have to try and have that be in the mix. As the old saw says, if you love what you're doing, you'll never work a day in your life. And I think there's a lot to that. And because you can look at me and say that I'm further down the road than anyone else here. And now I'm constantly getting the question from colleagues in other departments about retiring. They say, haven't you retired yet? How come aren't you thinking about it? And I tell them, listen, I'm fixing to keep going for a long time here, because not necessarily what I'm doing here, but I've already explored other opportunities and have made some transition into a biotechnology company with people that need my expertise, and I can carry this into a whole field that I have very little knowledge about in terms of biotech startups, et cetera. But they have a need for people with my knowledge, and it provides new opportunities. So follow your interests, follow your heart in many cases, and always try to find people who are knowledgeable about where it is you want to go. Ask them how they got there, and look for advice, and kind of be able to filter what is good advice and what is not good advice. So it's that whole process of maturation and experience, I think, is the best way I can put it.
Thank you. That is great advice. Liz?
Unmute is the first one, but there's so many things. I think I'm going to touch on, the idea of networking. And, you know, I think about one of the key takeaways from early in my career. We didn't really call it networking then. And I'm not talking networking in like I have 1,000 of LinkedIn connections, but, you know, look around and find your fellow students, and then earlier in your career, the people that you really connect with, and just sort of collect them along the way and put in the effort to keep in touch with those folks that inspire you, are doing things that are different from you, that can provide good advice. Because a career is a long time and you just never really know where people are going to land, and you're going to want those connections because someday you can pick up the phone and call that person that you knew in college or your first job or your second job, and they'll help you make that segue into another part of your career. And that's happened to me, you know, several times throughout 30 years. And I didn't really do it in a very strategic way. It's just, you know, turns out as an only child, I really liked having coworkers. They kind of were like my siblings that I never had growing up. But my takeaway is put in the work to keep connected to the people that inspire you, challenge you, and will give you good advice.
Yes, I love that. Thank you.
That's a good life lesson too,
Yeah.
not
well,
just work related. Yeah.
Yes. All right, Nancy, you want to close us out?
Yeah, mine is something that Liz said earlier, to be a forever learner. The jobs when Liz and Steve and I were coming out of school, there are jobs now that didn't even exist at that time that are out there now. And you're going to find through your career that the jobs are changing. So just be always keep an open mind to learn, and you know, as Steve says, follow your heart, but you can follow that by continuing to learn. And as long as you keep learning, it'll keep your mind sharp, hopefully, and it will also lead to opportunities at work.
Thank you, Nancy. That's great. Dr. Bidding, I think I'm going to turn it back over to you to kind of close us out. We can also see if there are any student questions at this time as well too. So I'll turn it back over to you.
Sure, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists and all of the great nuggets of advice. I know I was taking some notes here, so if you wouldn't mind, I want to grab some of the quotes just to share them back out to students that may have missed the sessions today. But for the students, if you have any questions, I'm going to try again. You can either unmute yourself, or you can place any questions that you have in the chat for us. We have this time open for you. So it could be questions based on your major, your career journey so far. Maybe you're thinking about trying something different, you know, that you haven't explored before, but the panelists are here to answer any questions that you may have. Okay.
Step up, guys. Come on, we're here.
I had a question.
Oh, sure, go ahead, Samuel.
Yes, there was a lot of talk about education and how important it is. But I would ask a question about would y'all think that experience in a certain field helped you out to get to where you are right now? And how did you got to that experience?
Okay, so who wants to take that question?
Well, you know, your experience accumulates as you move on, and I think what you've heard from us is that as you gain experience, you're not necessarily starting out and going to say, I'm going to get to some point very far down the road and gain experience towards that one goal. I think what's going to happen, Samuel, is as you gain experience and knowledge, that's going to help steer you into directions that capture your interest and your own personal talents and aptitudes. So I think that as I look going forward, standing back and looking forward as my life unfolded, it really got to where I am. The experiences themselves were not particularly focused on medicine at the time, but one experience leading to the next, and the next is what got me there. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Nabor. Go ahead, Liz.
No, just building on those comments, right? I think our whole working career, well, our whole lives are building on a series of experiences, and you know, I call it sort of consequence history, right? You face a problem and you solve the problem, and sometimes it goes well and sometimes not so well, but you learn and apply it somewhere else. And so I'll tell a little story. When I finished my business degree, actually Chevron gave me a job working in finance for a couple of years. And I learned a little bit about the finance business and, you know, how the accounting folks close the books. But the most important thing I actually learned on that assignment was the importance of stepping in someone else's shoes and understanding the issue from their perspective instead of just my perspective. And, you know, the kind of jokey way I summarize it is we were going to train, you know, petroleum engineers and geologists to, you know, interface with this accounting program. And, you know, the geologists and the petroleum engineer said, you know, if we could just get rid of those accountants, we could actually find some oil and do our job. And the accounting folks who had to make sure that how we managed our finances honored accounting policy would say, you know, if we could just get rid of these geologists and engineers, you know, we could close the books at the end of the month. And it's sort of an extreme characterization. But what I learned from that was, you know, it takes two big parts of the company to run the business. And unless we actually spend the time to understand each other's viewpoints, we're not going to get to a solution that makes sense for everybody. So taking time to step in somebody else's shoes and look at the problem from their perspective, being open and vulnerable enough to ask a lot of questions and you know, understand the contrary point of view. Pretty helpful life lesson that took me a couple of years in finance.
Nancy, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Not really. Samuel, I think you got excellent advice there.
All right, thank you. So I want to open up to
How about
any
Brian
others.
and Priyanka?
Oh, yes. Priyanka is one of our career counselors on our team. But feel free to chime in, Priyanka. But we have Harsha did ask a question. Brian, did you have any questions for the panelists? Okay, so we'll give you time to think about it. All right, so we'll go ahead and transition. You can go to the next slide, Caitlin. Just our thank you slide. So we do have, you can either click on that, we can share the link. I'll put the link in the chat for those that did attend this session, but I just want to thank the panelists for their time. This was a recorded session, so we'll share it with you as well. It'll be placed on our YouTube page. And then let me know if you're okay with sharing your contact information with students that did RSVP for this session. We do have questions that they usually come in and trickle in after the sessions. So if that's okay with you, feel free to email me and let me know. But I do want to thank you for your time, and that concludes the session for today.
Thank you, Tiffany, for the invitation.
Thanks,
I just
Tiffany.
want to say on behalf of the Dean's Office, thank you so much